The difficulties that women face in sports range from financial difficulties, what is expected of them, and the underrepresentation. The list could go on. There are two topics that I feel are important when it comes to women in sports. Those two topics are gender discrimination towards women in sports and the expectations of women's mental health in sports. I feel these are important, yet they are very common, but they do not get a lot of news coverage. There is gender discrimination towards women all around athletics. If we look at any field or career for women in sports, whether it's athletes, reporters, announcers, or analysts, it is male-dominated. So male-dominated that 40% of all people who participate in any sports career are women, yet only 4% of sports media coverage is. The percentage of women in sports editors increased from 10% in 2018 to 16.7% in 2021. Yet this is great, still 83% of sports reporters are male according to ESPN. This gender gap allows for male reporters to focus on a female athlete's appearance rather than their athletic accomplishments. Along with this, women and girls get fewer athletic opportunities, scholarships, and funds. If you look at the NCAA basketball, male coaches are paid significantly more than female coaches. The highest average of women's coaches is $984,135, and male coaches, the highest amount they were paid was over $5 million. The gap widens when women's sports receive dramatically less coverage, sponsorships, and marketing. A major topic of gender discrimination against women happened at the NCAA March Madness tournament back in 2021. Sedona Price was on the women's basketball team at the University of Oregon. She was a voice for women and the discrimination they face. Let's take a look at a TikTok that she posted about this.
Women. This is our weight room. Let me show y'all the men's weight room. Here's our practice court, right? And then here's that weight room. And then here's all this extra space.
As was shown in the video, the women's weight room and practice space was much smaller than the men's, and on top of that, the women's side of the tournament had the space for a bigger weight room or more practice courts, yet it was not provided. The NCAA said it wasn't a money issue, it was a space issue, but as we saw in the video, they had the space. The NCAA continues to discriminate against women even after being publicly outed about their actions. While we are on the topic of women's discrimination in sports, I should also mention women's sports are not as recognized as men's. Take the WNBA versus the NBA, for example. WNBA players earn 44 times less than their male counterparts in the NBA. It is clear that women get discriminated against way more than should ever be allowed by society. The expectation of women in sports is a huge topic, and I probably won't even scratch the surface with this video, but I'm going to try and cover as much as I can. The sexualization of women's bodies in sports affects women's mental health more than society wants to let on. Women, depending on their sport, have uniforms that are tight and show skin, and a lot of the time, women, especially young women or little girls, struggle with the thoughts of wanting to look like the girl next to her, when that does not need to be the case. With these thoughts starting at a young age, it can have long-term mental health effects on young women. Along with the long-term mental health effects, those thoughts, at times, do not even stem from themselves. They stem from their coaches or peers. Someone who was very open about this was the UCLA gymnast Caitlin Ohashi, who made the news after her Perfect 10 floor routine that stripped the typical floor routine stereotypes. In interviews following this news, she talked about her mental health in gymnastics and how she had coaches tell her she needed to look different.
I heard that it kind of took you to a dark place for a while, the body shaming.
Yeah.
What happened?
The way my coaches would kind of put it was not the best way you could get someone to understand that about their body. So we weren't educated ever on like food and healthy foods and what to eat and what not to. It was more like, don't eat, you look like an elephant, you look like you swallowed a pig.
You had coaches tell you that?
Yeah.
She was called so many demeaning names, all pertaining to how she looks, but not how strong and athletic she is. If we take a look at another sport that always has had body shaming issues surrounding it, it's cheerleading. Look at the cheer uniforms. Look at the men's and then look at the women's. One of them has pretty much all skin covered and one of them shows a lot of skin. One of the most famous all-star cheer teams back in the early 2010s was the California All-Stars Smoed. One of the flyers, after retiring from the sport, became open to talking about how she struggled with accepting how she looked due to being a flyer, always being judged, and the constant feeling of needing to be better. When I played water polo, danced, did gymnastics, I was always being told I need to be taller, stronger, or faster if I'm going to do anything athletically professional in my life. What some may deem worse than the body shaming issues and how it affects mental health is after coaches and peers telling them things that can negatively affect mental health, they expect female athletes to do nothing and let their mental health decline. Along with that, female athletes just get burnt out and need a break, yet they are not allowed to feel that way due to the stereotypes and the expectation of how women should present themselves. As a female athlete all growing up, I felt there was this expectation of me that I couldn't feel burnt out or overwhelmed or stressed. I felt this way due to the pressure of being an athlete, going to school, and still trying to have a social life. In high school, I was a varsity athlete, played on a very competitive club water polo team, on the exec board for a club called Mod UN, was in orchestra, and was taking AP and honors classes, all while still trying to figure out high school. There would be days where I would leave my house at 5 a.m. and wouldn't get back from practices, meetings, and school till 9:30, and then when I did get home, I would do homework till midnight. During this time, I got burnt out, but I had coaches telling me to suck it up, you're young, you're fine. So over the years, I started to believe that it wasn't okay to feel the way I did, which was burnt out and exhausted. I know I wasn't and still am not the only female athlete that feels this way. Naomi Osaka withdrew from the French Open tennis tournament after being fined for skipping a press conference. She later said it was due to mental health reasons. Amanda Baird documented her struggles with depression and poor self-image during her years in the spotlight as a swimmer. Simone Biles is one of the most U.S. decorated female gymnasts, and she withdrew from the Tokyo Olympics because of her mental health. Not only do professional athletes struggle with mental health and constantly don't say anything, but so do collegiate athletes. It has been found that the NCAA has a female athlete mental health problem. 40% of women reported feeling overwhelmed by all they have to do, either constantly or mostly every day, compared to 25% of men. 38% of women reported feeling mentally exhausted at a high frequency compared to 22% of men, and 29% of women reported feeling overwhelming anxiety at a high frequency compared to 12% of men. That is no different for a young woman who played on the Nebraska volleyball team. Her name is Kenzie Knuckles. Let's take a look at an interview she did with her coach during Mental Health Awareness Month.
I did hide a lot of my feelings in volleyball. I think that just in general with athletes, it's like kind of your security blanket a little bit. It's like that place where like, well, I'm good at this, and yeah, like everything else doesn't really matter. Cause
I just had this gut feeling that if we stayed with her and let her work through it, that it was all going to be okay. And I didn't want to bail out. And I know some of the people were saying, you know, you ought to let her go. She's done with volleyball. But I just never believed that. But she was somebody I wanted to fight for, you know, and I wanted to help.
This is one of the few times I found where a coach cared, and by Coach Cook caring, it reignited a fight in Kenzie. She also was very open about her mental health and what she wants to be like. This bravery and willingness to be open is breaking down the barriers that have been put up surrounding mental health. Mental health in sports is so imperative, and especially with women. Women tend to have more emotions, and if people are trying to tell female athletes that it's not okay to feel burnt out or not be okay, then why is it okay for men to take time off and not be questioned about it? The difficulties women face in sports don't end at the topics I've mentioned. There's a long list, but due to the sake of time, I try to condense it into topics I felt were important to talk about. Some questions to consider are, if you saw gender discrimination like Sedona did, would you say something or would you let someone else do it first? And have you ever had experiences like the ones I mentioned if you were an athlete, and if so, how did you react?